The House Ethics and Oversight Committee will come to order. Would the clerk please take the attendance?
Chair Burns,
Here.
Representatives Hope,
Here.
Breen, Churches,
Present.
Hoskins,
Here.
Wagella,
Here.
Coons,
Here.
Wozniak,
Here.
Harris.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have 8 members present at a quorum.
Thank you so much. All right, Representative Churches will move to adopt the meeting minutes from our February 29th, 2024 meeting. There being no objection, the motion will prevail by unanimous consent. Welcome, everyone. At today's committee meeting, we will have a presentation from the Michigan Campaign Finance Network. And joining us today, we have Executive Director Nick Pidgeon. He'll be here to discuss dark money in light of Sunshine Week. So for a little context, before we invite Mr. Pidgeon up, Sunshine Week is a national initiative by the American Society of News Editors meant to spark a discussion about the importance of open government and public access to government documents and meetings. Sunshine Week is also a way to draw attention to the media's role in advocating for government transparency. As we know, an open, accessible government is vital to establishing and maintaining the people's trust and confidence in their government and in the government's ability to effectively serve its citizens, and free press is an essential part of that mission. So following our presentation today, members will have time to ask at least one question apiece. And at this time, I would invite Executive Director Nick Pidgeon to come up and begin the presentation. Yep, there you go.
There we are. Hi. Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
everyone. I want to thank the House Ethics and Oversight Committee and Chairperson Burns for inviting me to talk about campaign finance, including a brief on all the different fundraising vehicles and committees, and an explanation of dark money and what other states have done to make it more transparent. I felt that because this week is Sunshine Week here in Michigan, it would be fruitful to demonstrate all the vehicles for raising and spending during campaign season, from most transparent to least. As we all know, Michigan has for a long time ranked as one of the least transparent states in the nation. Although the passage and implementation of Proposal 1, which requires you and all state-level public officials to file personal financial disclosure statements, was a huge step in the right direction. However, there is increased statewide and national attention on dark money and independent expenditures. And other states, including Arizona and Alaska, have made it so that independent expenditure groups have to disclose these donors. So in addition to a primer on campaign finance vehicles and dark money, I want to go into reforms other states have implemented. Before we begin, I want to talk briefly about our organization. The Michigan Campaign Finance Network is a nonpartisan 501c3 that started in 1996 with the altruistic goal of increasing public awareness of the impact that money has on politics. From the beginning, MCFN has been committed to making valuable fact-based information accessible to the public, voters, and policymakers so that Michigan can thrive for the people, by the people. Our work includes conducting original investigative reporting and research, outreach via presentations, such as this one, and serving as a resource for policymakers, journalists, and the public, which I hope to accomplish with this presentation. What MCFN does not do is advocate for specific policies, and we are strictly nonpartisan. We are also supported through our donors and do not accept anonymous donations over $250. So I'm going to begin with an explanation of the different campaign finance committees and rank them from the most transparent to the least. From there, I'm going to dive more specifically into the dark money vehicle of choice, 501c4s, and show you what makes them so secretive. I'll also highlight an example of how they can anonymize donors to certain political action committees, with an emphasis on their contributions to ballot question committees. Lastly, we'll talk about actions other states have done to force the disclosure of the sources behind dark money. Here we are. On screen now is a chart of common fundraising vehicles organized from most transparent to least. The first is campaign committees. Your quote, Friends of X, X for state representative, your personal campaign account as designated in your statement of organization. These committees are subject to contribution limits that change per cycle and can only spend money on things in pursuit of their own nomination, and as well as incidental expenses, which are 16 categories of ordinary and necessary expenses incurred in carrying out the business of elected office. Upon dissolution of the committee can transfer its unused funds to another committee held by the same candidate whose contribution limits are the same or exceed the contribution limits for the original committee, with some prohibitions and exceptions, especially in moving to a federally regulated committee. These committees file regular campaign finance reports to either the Secretary of State or the county clerk. It is also legal for a campaign committee to contribute to or loan a ballot question committee. Independent committees include leadership PACs, non-super PACs, and some separate segregated funds by tribes, labor organizations, and corporations. These committees, after achieving independent status by making 3 expenditures that support or oppose 3 candidates under individual contribution limits, can then give 10 times the amount an individual or a political committee is permitted to give a candidate. They are not subject to contribution limits and can spend money for lawful purposes in adherence to the Michigan Campaign Finance Act. However, only separate segregated funds can give to other separate segregated funds, but separate segregated funds can give to independent committees. They can raise money from individuals and other Michigan PACs, but not from super PACs and 501c4s. One thing about leadership PACs is that a connected candidate can set up multiple, which basically nullifies the 10 times donation limit to candidates. Independent committees file regular reports to the Secretary of State or county like candidate committees. The 4 caucus committees are considered a special subtype of an independent committee that is subject to a contribution limit of $48,875, but can make unlimited direct contributions to a state legislative candidate if they are not currently contested in a primary. They are not to be confused with political party committees at the state, county, and congressional district level, which have contribution and donation limits like independent committees. Political committees are committees that are not candidate committees, political party committees, caucus committees, independent or independent expenditure committees, or ballot question committees, and can make expenditures for any lawful purpose, but must adhere to individual contribution limits when spending for or against a candidate. Now we get to independent expenditure committees, aka super PACs, which can receive money from any domestic entity, including 501c4s and corporations. They cannot give to any of the committees we just explored, but can give to other super PACs or ballot question committees. They are not allowed to coordinate with campaigns, but there are examples of this occurring, with not too many examples of coordination being prosecuted. The line between a coordinated spending effort by candidates, parties, and interested individuals is very loose and hard to investigate and prosecute. They file reports to the Department of State, but because they can receive contributions from 501c4s, the identity of the donors can be hidden. This is what people call dark money. I will go more in depth on this later. I've mentioned ballot question committees a few times. They function closest to an independent expenditure committee. They can raise unlimited funds from corporations, labor unions, 501c4s, but can't give to other committees besides ballot question committees, and cannot spend for or against candidates, parties, or PACs. These committees have grown in recent years as county and statewide initiatives have become very contentious and popular. Now we move on to federally regulated political entities. Section 527 refers to the tax code that allows political entities to file for tax-exempt status. An example of this are PACs that file at the state level. They can raise unlimited contributions from any domestic source and can give to committees that can accept corporate funds, but must disclose their donors to the IRS in Form 8872. This is why many super PACs choose to file for a 501c4 nonprofit status as a social welfare organization, which enjoy the same powers of making independent expenditures and giving to certain committees while only having to file a Form 990, which doesn't have to include the names of their donors. This is why they are the dark money vehicle of choice. To make this clear, let's walk through a quick example. So here we're looking at a LARA filing for a 501c4. To incorporate in Michigan, all they have to do is give a boilerplate articles of incorporation and list a registered agent that can be a compliance corporation. We won't get any of their information until May of next year when they have to file their IRS Form 990. So they can raise and spend money, like we discussed above, without filing any financial documents until likely after the election has ended. Anyways, this is what you find on the LARA page. We know the name, they're doing business as names, the registered agent can be a compliance corporation, the name of the person who incorporated it, none of what we discussed. So anyways, what do we learn in a Form 990? We learn board members and their salary, companies they paid, only if they were paid $100,000 or more in the last year, and to other nonprofits they made grants to, unitemized statements of revenue, unitemized statements of expenses, and 5, donor information. only if they choose to. Usually you'll see pages upon pages of nameless contributions listed like the one displayed here. So this organization can give unlimited funds way before 990 is filed to a ballot question committee and other independent expenditure committees. The committee has to file its campaign finance reports with the county or state, but only has to list the name of the 501c4. So this is, you could see that campaign finance filing for that ballot question committee. You have an amount from 501c4, then it's spent on election-related activity. Sometimes people have a hard time, quite understanding what dark money is. So I thought walking through a point-by-point example would be helpful to the public and to the committee. A couple of other states have considered and adopted reforms to help eliminate dark money. In 2022, Arizona passed Proposition 201 by a very large margin, which requires the disclosure of any contributor who pays $5,000 or more in an election cycle for any, quote, independent campaign spending. Independent campaign spending includes express and non-express advocacy, as well as research, polling, mailing, and social media list acquisition by independent committees. Under this law, independent committees must track the original sources of all contributors over $5,000 and must ask these donors if they want their money spent on independent campaign spending, even if the funds are transferred from another entity. If not, they cannot use their money for this purpose. This stops the anonymization of donors to independent expenditure committees, the main contributor of dark money. In addition, Prop 211 established a Citizens Clean Ethics Commission to enforce the law, including the additional requirement that any independent campaign public communication must display the names of the top 3 donors in the advertisement or make it available within the advertisement. So, for a TV ad, it would have to be actually there, and a text message ad, it's a link you click to see that. The commission can investigate complaints and issue fines for 100 to 300% of the undisclosed or improperly disclosed contributions. Similar to Arizona's Prop 201, Alaska passed Ballot Measure 2 in 2020, which requires any individual entity or person that donates $2,000 in aggregate in a calendar year to an entity that has made an independent expenditure in the previous or current election cycle must fill out a disclosure form and submit it to the Alaska Public Offices Commission within 24 hours. So it's kind of on the flip side. The onus is on the people actually making the contribution versus the independent expenditure organization having to collect that data themselves. And there is an example of here what a filing looks like. So this person who donated to a couple of different organizations had to say how much they spent and what the purpose of the donation was for and what election it was for. In 2023, Maine Question 2 voters approved an initiative that barred foreign governments and entities with 5% foreign government ownership to influence the nomination of a candidate or in support or opposition of a ballot measure. In the upcoming election, Mainers will decide whether to create a contribution limit of $5,000 to independent expenditure committees. Thank you for bearing with me as I tried to simplify, what dark money is and walking through the Michigan Campaign Finance Act. The nature of our campaign finance laws are complex, and the relationship between different committees, who can give to who can spend on what, is confusing for you and I, let alone the average Michigander who doesn't work in this space. I hope this presentation helped bring clarity to this issue during Sunshine Week as you all consider ways to make Michigan more transparent. Thank you, and I welcome any questions from the committee.
Thank you so much. We appreciate the presentation. So I'll kick us off with a quick question. I think earlier on in the presentation you were talking about super PACs and who they can coordinate with or who they can't. And you mentioned that there are examples of super PACs doing certain types of coordination that they're not supposed to, right, by law. And you mentioned that it's hard or virtually impossible to kind of take that up in the court system. So can you talk to us a little bit more about why that's so difficult and if you've seen examples maybe in other states of what they've done to be able to address that issue?
Sure. I mean, there really isn't much other than kind of what I've talked about in Alaska where, at least the donors have to be disclosed in these 501c4s. I know that on the slide that shows the different committees, it mentions in 2017 in Florida, Governor Rick Scott, when he was running, his staff set up this PAC. It didn't spend money for many years. He ran. It gives a lot of money to different independent expenditure groups, and it's just it's easy to come up with an explanation. It's very hard to prosecute these instances when it's very clear that people connected to people in office and work in the space set up these very confusing myriad of fundraising vehicles to then spend money in undisclosed ways. So it's very difficult, but at least getting to the point where these original donors to these 501c4s are disclosed helps at least illuminate that and give people a proper view of who's behind dark money.
Okay, great, thank you, that's helpful. All right, do we have committee member questions? I had one more question, but I want to open it up. Yep, Rep. Wagella?
I think this is just a fascinating topic. And I just want to recognize that even as an elected official, I'm always learning more about this. And you went over it in detail, but I can imagine for anyone who is not dialed into politics, just no idea how any of this even works, right? Your average person. So that, I think, complicates this. But just want to talk briefly about leadership PACs, because I think something you said in my head really clicked. Essentially, we have our own committees, right? But if you start your own leadership PAC, you can start several of those. And essentially, our limits that we have don't really exist. Is that a way to look at this? And then also my question is, are there any states that have banned having leadership PACs in general?
Sure, thank you. I don't quite know, what states. I mean, they're called different things in other states, and which ones have banned. I'll definitely look into that. I think that's interesting to see how they've legislated that. I mean, to me, because you can stack multiple committees as a connected member, the 10 times donation limit, really doesn't make sense. It doesn't exist. So I think that is a problem if you have contribution limits for some things, to a candidate committee, but then these leadership committees can spend and you could stack them.
Okay. Rep, all set? Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, do we have a question? Rep. Wozniak, go ahead.
Thank you. Regarding the Alaska bill, you said $2,000 aggregate, but that still would allow a husband and wife to give $2,000 each, and if they don't hit the $2,000, they don't have to disclose. Is that correct?
I think that's correct. I mean, the same in the Arizona bill. If you donate $4,999
Right.
in aggregate, then it's not. But donations over that amount, you would have to file that form, or the independent expenditure group you gave to would have to trace your original donor information through and disclose that.
I appreciate your knowledge on all of this. Thank you.
Of course.
It's definitely a tangled web. Thank you, Rep. Wozniak. Rep. Kuntz, did you have a question?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Please go ahead.
Waiting.
Yep, I got
Thank
you.
you, Chair. So part of my concern, this has been ruled on by the Supreme Court. Help me, I believe it was Alabama versus the NAACP. NAACP. Maine has come out against it. Planned Parenthood in Maine has come out against this. And what it does is it protects their members. Can we talk about some of that? Can we talk about how this protects people advocating for their cause?
I've certainly seen that argument. That, I mean, when this came through in Alaska and Arizona, I mean, people did speak about this, and it was challenged in Arizona. There are people wanting to put their money towards political activism. This is a legitimate way to engage in politics. And I know that the court in Arizona said, we're not barring you from doing that, but we do feel that it takes precedence over the First Amendment and, a potential for retaliation to disclose and to have that available to people, wanting to know who's investing money in their election. So that, I mean, I've seen, the courts come out on both sides, whatever jurisdiction is taken up in until it could be, ruled upon by the highest court or in courts here.
Right.
We'll have to see.
It was Alabama versus NAACP. Are you a registered lobbyist?
No.
Is this lobbying?
No.
Okay.
Informational only. Thank you, Rep. And I have one question, kind of in line with some of the others. Mr. Pigeon, I know that you were talking about kind of the different states that have tackled the dark money space and the C4s. And I think it was in Alaska, you mentioned, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was Alaska, where they actually have the donor fill out like the disclosure
Yeah.
paperwork. I'd just love to get your thoughts on that because that seems pretty rare to have the onus be on the donor. Are you aware of like any issues that have, come up as a result of that or just anything in that ecosystem? I was surprised to see that.
Yeah, it was really, it was interesting. And I went through the, their little database. I took a picture of it. It was very easy to find when people submitted a report. I haven't heard of any issues. I assume that those organizations have some sort of infrastructure in place to make their donors aware that they have to submit this.
Right.
And so it would be incumbent upon them to make that clear to their donors.
Okay. Thank you. I found that interesting. I haven't seen that elsewhere before in my research or things that I've looked at. Thank you. All right. Do we have other questions? Rep. Wagella?
I could go all day, but I'll try not to. This, I think, is the most important issue in politics. Two questions, kind of related, but my understanding, at least at the federal level, the data shows that 90% of elections, the person who wins has raised the most money, which I think is why this conversation is so important. I don't know what the data shows for local and state races, but kind of asking if you know anything about that data, and then specifically asking how do we compare to how other countries treat campaign finance? That's something I realize I know almost nothing about.
I think that's a good question. I haven't. Most of my research is between states, not other countries. It seems like a very specific issue, to countries and how they handle their campaign finance. I'm trying to come up with an example that I've seen. But the evidence shows, like you stated, the person who does raise the most money is that is the leading factor for who is elected. And I think it's something for people to look at, and the network believes that at least having as much information to the voters as possible and disclosure and transparency is best for people when they're making their choices at the ballot box.
All right. Thank you, Rep. Anything else? All set? Okay. Are there any other questions from committee members? All right. Going once, going twice. Rep. Wagella, all set? Did you have anything else? Okay. All right. Awesome. Awesome. That sounds good. All right. Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Pigeon, for coming in today. Thank you for the informative presentation. We really appreciate it. And thank you for joining us during Sunshine Week. And I would encourage committee members, to keep in contact. I think your contact info is up on the slides right now. Everyone should have a paper copy of that. Definitely, Campaign Finance Network is a great resource for folks looking to dig into this. So thank you again. We really appreciate it. And thank you to the members for their questions. All right, and I think we have no absent members, so we are all set there. All right, so at this point, there being no further business before the committee will stand adjourned.